My mother slapped me in front of 200 guests at my sister's wedding because I refused to give up my penthouse. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just turned my face back toward her, silently, knowing she had made a critical mistake. Because in that very moment, standing just a few feet away, was Nora Green, a federal prosecutor and someone who owed me a favor. They thought they were putting me in my place. But what they didn't know was, I'd been quietly preparing for this my entire life. For years, I played the role of the quiet daughter, the overachiever, the one who worked and gave and never demanded anything in return. But not anymore. That slap wasn't just an insult. It was a public declaration that I didn't belong. So I answered back not with rage, but with the kind of silence that shakes foundations. They called it the wedding of the season, a garden ceremony in Northern California, with soft gold lighting, live cello music, and a guest list straight out of a lifestyle magazine. I wore navy blue, simple and elegant, and came alone. That wasn't unusual. I always came alone. What was unusual, however, was how fast I regretted attending. The moment I stepped into the reception area, I felt it. The stares, the fake smiles, the way some distant relatives tilted their heads, trying to remember whether I was the sister or the cousin. My mother, Linda, spotted me within seconds. She looked radiant, of course expensive makeup, tailored champagne dress, hair set just right. But beneath the gloss was the same sharp edge I remembered from childhood. She walked toward me like a hostess approaching an unwanted guest. "Rebecca," she said, kissing my cheek. "You made it?" "I RSVP'd 3 months ago," I replied. She smiled tightly. "Well, you know how busy you are." Translation: you're never here when the family needs you. Not that she ever defined what need meant. The bride-to-be younger sister, Hannah, had always been the golden child. Spontaneous, pretty, and conveniently helpless whenever something difficult needed doing. I helped her with her college tuition. I paid for her first car. And now? Apparently, I was meant to surrender my penthouse too. I hadn't even sat down before my mother asked, "Do you have a moment for a quick family chat?" No warmth. No curiosity about my work. Just an agenda. "Sure," I said, "but I'd like a drink first." I walked over to the refreshment table, poured a glass of champagne, and gave myself 3 seconds to breathe. I stared across the venue, white floral arches, cascading fairy lights, beautiful people with beautiful lives. And yet, somehow, I felt like I was being lined up for sacrifice. Hannah approached while I was mid-sip, wearing her designer gown and that bright, high-gloss smile that always hid something sharper. "There she is," she said, looping her arm through mine. "The woman of the hour." "Isn't that you today?" I asked calmly. "Oh, don't be like that," she laughed. "It's your penthouse that everyone's been talking about." I froze. She was getting straight to it. I looked past her, and sure enough, my mother had reappeared, her eyes flicking between us like she was watching a negotiation unfold. "We just want to talk," Hannah continued. "There's a better way for all of us to live. And it starts with that property. You don't even use all that space." I took a slow breath. I had walked into this wedding expecting fake smiles, not a full-blown property ambush. But something in me didn't flinch. Because I already knew where this was going, and I knew they had no idea who they were about to corner. We sat down at a round table near the edge of the garden, framed by white roses and the gentle hum of string instruments. But nothing about the conversation was soft. My mother didn't waste time. "Rebecca," she began, folding her hands as if preparing for a board meeting. "You know your sister and Adam are starting a family. They can't keep living in that cramped little apartment forever." I nodded slowly. "They just got married an hour ago." "That's exactly why we're planning ahead," she said sweetly. Then came the blow. "We want you to transfer the deed to your penthouse to them. As a wedding gift." I choked on my champagne. "A gift?" I repeated. "Yes," my mother confirmed, unblinking. "Think of it as helping your sister start her life right. You already have so much, Rebecca." I leaned back, forcing myself to stay composed. You mean the penthouse I worked 10 years to afford? The one I bought in full after closing a multi-million-dollar real estate deal you told everyone was just luck? Hannah interrupted, her tone coaxing. Come on, Becca. You've always been the practical one. You don't even like big spaces. Big spaces? I blinked. It's 400 square feet, and I live there. It's not a vacation house. She tilted her head, faux sympathy blooming. But you live alone. And there it was, the dagger wrapped in a smile. This wasn't just about space. It was about punishment for not playing their game. For being successful, unmarried, and unwilling to fold. My mother stepped in again. It's not like you're giving it away. Think of it as keeping it in the family. You mean, giving it to the family? I corrected. Linda's tone sharpened. Don't be difficult. I looked at Themi, mother, my sister, both staring at me like I was the selfish one, as if the home I had earned was now a burden I should feel guilty for keeping. You have the power to give something meaningful today, my mother said, almost solemnly. Something that truly honors this family. I smiled faintly. And you have the nerve to ask for it in public, dressed like saints, hoping the setting will make me too polite to say no. Hannah's eyes narrowed. So, is that a yes? I finished my champagne, set the glass down gently, and replied, no, it's a hell no. There was a moment of stunned silence after I said no, like the world around us needed a second to absorb the audacity of a daughter refusing her role as sacrificial lamb. Then came the anger. My mother's face twisted, rage barely masked beneath layers of powder and poise. You ungrateful little girl, she hissed. I'm 35, I replied, and very grateful to myself. I stood up, smoothing the creases in my dress. I'm going back to the reception now. I'd like to enjoy a slice of cake before this wedding turns into a courtroom. You're making a scene, Hannah snapped, standing beside Mom now like a perfect echo. No, I said evenly. I'm refusing to be used. There's a difference. And that's when it happened. My mother reached out and slapped me across the face. It wasn't a theatrical movie slap. It was real, quick, sharp, loud. My head jerked slightly, not from the force, but from the shock. A gasp rippled through the garden, audible, collective. Silverware clinked against porcelain as conversations died mid-sentence. The quartet stopped playing. Someone dropped their glass. All 200 guests were now looking directly at me. The slap had echoed across rose petals and champagne fountains. It wasn't just a strikeout, it was a declaration. You don't belong unless you submit. And still I didn't flinch. I slowly turned my head back, my cheek burning, my jaw firm. My voice didn't shake. That was a mistake. You deserve worse, my mother said, her voice trembling with fury. You've always made us feel like we were beneath you. I could feel my pulse pounding, but not from humiliation. From clarity. I scanned the crowd. All eyes were on me. Some were wide in horror, others entertained. I caught murmurs, whispers, a few guests trying to film discreetly, a few others just openly shocked. And then, just beyond the rows of white chairs, I saw her. Nora Green. Dressed in a black sheath dress, heels sunk slightly into the grass, her face unreadable, she had stood quietly through the ceremony. I'd barely noticed her earlier. Now her eyes were locked on mine. And in that one look I knew, I had a witness far more powerful than any applause. She had been watching the whole thing. And more importantly, she remembered what I'd done for her. 3 years ago, Nora had been in a brutal estate battle with her late aunt's family. I'd stepped in, pro bono, and helped her keep the house that had meant everything to her childhood. Now, she was a federal prosecutor with influence, credibility, and a long memory. I turned back to my mother. You just slapped the wrong woman. You just shame this family, she barked. No, I said calmly. You did that the moment you asked me to buy my way into your love. I reached into my clutch, pulled out my phone, and began typing. My fingers moved steadily, not because I had a plan, but because I didn't need one anymore. I had facts. I had witnesses. I had my limits. Rebecca, My mother growled. Put the phone down. But I already had. The message was sent. I looked up and met Nora's gaze again. She gave me the slightest nod. It was enough. I didn't say another word. Not to my mother, not to Hannah, not to the guests. I simply stood there, face stinging, hands steady, heart oddly calm while the garden remained suspended in silence. A few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked away, suddenly fascinated by the floral centerpieces. Others leaned closer to each other and whispered in hushed tones. I caught a few phones still held discreetly under napkins. The story was already spreading. But I said nothing. Because silence, I had learned, terrifies people far more than shouting ever could. Rebecca, my mother said again, her voice lower now. You're being dramatic. I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts until I found the group chat labeled The Circle, a quiet list of lawyers, real estate moguls, and journalists I'd built relationships with over the years. Friends. Allies. People with reach. One message. That's all it took. Garden wedding turned violent. Mother slapped me for refusing to give sister penthouse. Public. Witnessed. Statement to follow. Send. From across the lawn, I saw Nora Green reach into her bag and pull out her phone. Good. That meant she'd received it. That meant she knew this wasn't a meltdown, it was a move. And now, the world would know what this perfect family really looked like behind its curated smiles and floral archways. I tucked my phone away and looked at my mother again. Her face had paled. She stepped forward slightly. What did you just do? Nothing, I replied. Just letting people know what happened. You'll ruin your reputation, she snapped. I tilted my head. No, you already tried that. Hannah, now visibly shaken, whispered something to Adam, her new husband, who looked absolutely terrified to be in the middle of something so not Instagrammable. And I felt no pity for them. For the first time in years, I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't apologizing for making people uncomfortable. I wasn't minimizing myself to keep the peace. I was done. You think anyone's going to care? Mom hissed. You think your little tantrum is going to matter to real people? Linda, a voice said from behind her. We both turned. It was Nora. She had stepped forward, calm and composed, her heels silent against the lawn. I care, she said, because I saw everything. My mother froze. I saw you slap your daughter in front of 200 witnesses. I heard your voice. I watched your face. And who exactly are you? My mother asked, defensive now. Nora pulled a small badge case from her purse and flipped it open. Federal prosecutor, Southern District. Dead silence. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. For one long second, no one moved. The words, federal prosecutor, seemed to hang mid-air, heavier than the slap itself. My mother blinked rapidly. Her lips parted like she was about to argue, but no sound came out. Hannah gripped Adam's arm like a lifeline, and even he looked like he was regretting every decision that had led to this exact moment. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed. Once. Then again. And again. I took it out quietly, almost ceremonially, and scanned the flood of notifications now pouring in. Group chats, direct messages, mentions. The video of the slap, yes, someone had filmed it, was already making the rounds. So much for keeping it in the family. A message from Rachel, a journalist from the Chronicle. Saw what happened. Would you like to comment? This could be a feature piece on family, money, and power. Another from Mark Torres, editor at a luxury real estate blog. We're covering your work next month. Should we include what happened today? And then this, from Clara Danvers, a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years. I was at table 6. You don't owe them anything. I stand with you. I looked up. Guests were whispering faster now. Nora hadn't moved. She didn't have to. Her presence alone was now reshaping the entire landscape of this event. My mother tried to recover. She's overreacting, she said, gesturing at me. She's always been dramatic. But Nora shook her head slowly. I know what assault looks like, and that slap wasn't frustration, it was calculated. It was about dominance. She's my daughter, my mother snapped. And I'm someone who sees abuse in every courtroom I step into, Nora replied. Family doesn't excuse violence. My fingers kept moving. I wasn't rage posting. I wasn't lashing out. I was documenting. I was archiving every single word, every headline, every show of support for myself, for the record, and for every woman who'd ever been told to smile through humiliation for the sake of keeping the family together. My mother turned to me again, visibly unraveling. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said quietly. I'm just not covering for you anymore. The buzzing hadn't stopped. In fact, it was intensifying. My name was trending in 3 different circles: legal, real estate, and social. And still I stood there, not triumphant, not smuggest resolved. This wasn't a moment of victory. It was a moment of release. I'd like to say a few words, Nora said calmly, stepping forward into full view of the crowd. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmur like a gavel in a courtroom. People turned toward her. Some instinctively straightened in their chairs. Others froze mid-sip. The garden, once full of music and laughter, now felt like a silent courtroom, and Nora Green was the unexpected judge. I wasn't planning to speak today, she continued. I came as a quiet guest, grateful to be here to celebrate. But I witnessed something unacceptable. And because of who I am and what I do for a living, I can't pretend I didn't see it. She turned directly toward my mother. Miss Calloway, you assaulted your daughter in public. That's not my opinion. That's a legal fact. My mother's lips curled. Are you threatening me? No, Nora replied. I'm stating what everyone saw, and what's already been recorded on multiple phones. She turned to the guests, her voice firm but even. For those who don't know me, I'm Nora Green. I work for the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of California. My job is to prosecute federal crimes. But before I ever stepped into that role, I was a woman who nearly lost her home to greedy relatives. And I was saved quietly, respectfully, by the very woman who was slapped in front of all of you today. A wave of hushed whispers rolled through the crowd. She didn't ask for credit. She didn't charge me a dime. She simply said, "This is wrong, and I'll help you fix it. That's Rebecca Calloway." I felt my throat tighten, not from shame, not from pain, but from something heavier: recognition. Nora wasn't just backing me up, she was flipping the entire narrative. This isn't about a penthouse, she continued. It's about a pattern, a family dynamic that rewards silence and punishes boundaries. I've seen it before in court, in testimony, in bruises that don't always show up on skin. Nora looked straight at Hannah, who had gone ghost white. And to you, the new bride, if you want to start a marriage based on theft, manipulation, and public violence, that's your choice. But don't think for a second there won't be consequences. Adam reached out to whisper something to Hannah, who swatted his hand away. Nora turned back to the crowd. What we witnessed wasn't just personal, it was cultural. A reminder that successful women are still expected to shrink, to give up, to hand over their victories in the name of family. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And some of us are done shrinking. A long, slow silence followed. Then, something unexpected happened. Applause. Not loud, not thunderous, but real. Scattered at first, then growing. From my former law professor seated near the aisle, from Clara at table 6. From a journalist near the fountain. From people who knew what they had just witnessed wasn't just drama. It was justice. And, maybe no lie, a turning point. The applause faded slowly, like the last notes of a requiem. But the effect lingered, irreversible. My mother stood frozen, face rigid, jaw tight. Hannah looked shattered, no longer the blushing bride, but a woman stripped of her stage and spotlight. The wedding, if you could still call it that, was unraveling by the minute. Guests began making excuses. One by one, They left their tables, stepping away from champagne flutes and monogrammed napkins, murmuring words like emergency and early drive. The carefully choreographed event had become a slow-motion evacuation. Even the string quartet was quietly packing up their instruments. I stayed exactly where I was. I wasn't done. A young woman I didn't recognize approached, merely 30s, neat blazer, camera in hand. "Miss Calloway," she said softly, "I'm with West Coast Legal Affairs. We've been following your real estate arbitration cases. Would you be willing to comment on what happened today?" I blinked. This was supposed to be my sister's wedding. She offered a sad smile. "And yet no one's talking about the groom." Fair point. I declined the interview for now, but gave her my card. Across the lawn, Adam Hannah's new husband was arguing with a man who looked suspiciously like his boss. His gestures were frantic, his face pale. Clearly, damage control was already underway. I spotted my mother pacing by the floral archway, on the phone, no doubt calling whoever remained on her side of the social ladder. Her voice carried faintly. "It was taken out of context. It was just a slap. She's exaggerating. Just a slap." Those 3 words would come back to haunt her. My phone buzzed again. A text from my assistant, Claire. TMZ just picked up the story. Headline: Mother of the bride slaps high, powered realtor over penthouse dispute at garden wedding. Want me to release a statement? Also, we've received 6 new client inquiries since TWAPM. The irony didn't escape me. The very slap meant to put me in my place had, instead, amplified my platform. I typed back, "Prepare something brief. Grateful for support. No public comment at this time. Focus remains on serving clients with integrity." I slid the phone into my clutch and exhaled. For the first time in hours, the sun broke through the clouds sharply, unapologetically. It hit the rose petals, the crystal glassware, the trembling faces of people who had hoped I'd shrink and disappear. Instead, I had stood my ground. Silently, strategically, and with every bit of power they once pretended I didn't have. And I wasn't finished. I left the wedding without looking back. No dramatic exit. No tears. No final word. Just the sound of my heels clicking softly on the stone path as I walked through the collapsing fantasy my family had built. Flower arch, one lie at a time. The valet brought my car around without a word. He didn't need to ask what happened. Everyone knew. By the time I pulled into the underground garage of my building, the notifications had doubled. Screenshots of the slap. Hashtags, penthousegate, slap heard in the garden. Rebecca Calloway was right. A clip of Nora Greene's speech was already being shared by women's rights pages and legal commentary accounts. But I wasn't thinking about virality. I was thinking about peace. When I stepped into my penthouse me space, my skyline, my silence, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Everything was exactly how I'd left it. The bookshelves, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, the sun casting warm streaks on my hardwood floors. This wasn't just property. It was proof. Of work. Of dignity. Of who I'd become without their permission. I made a cup of tea, changed into soft clothes, and walked barefoot across the cool tile floor. Then I opened the 3rd bedroom, the one my mother called excess, and stepped inside. It was a guest room now, neatly made, calm. I imagined hosting the people who'd stood by me today. Clara, Nora, even a client or two who saw me not just as a lawyer, but as a person with boundaries. Maybe that was the gift the slap had given me. The final severing of the illusion that I owed my family anything beyond civility. My phone rang. It was Hannah. I let it ring out. The second time, she texted. "I didn't know she was going to hit you. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted the message. She had a husband now, a different life, and I had mine. A stronger one. As night fell, I stood by the window with my tea, watching the city pulse and glow beneath me. The world kept moving, but I was finally still. No more giving out of guilt. No more shrinking to keep the peace. No more apologies for taking up space. just me. In my home, in my skin, in my silence. And in that silence, I felt free.